Well, guys, usually when I shoot, video on Sunday for this, usually it's because it's raining, and always makes me think about reading comic books on Sundays when I was a kid and stuff. And today it's snowing, which seems to be appropriate and cold. I'm gonna get up, try to go for a run, clean my house. I'll probably watch one of the VHS movies I bought this week. YouTube was probably gonna be the last thing I thought about. And of course I jump up there, and as I drag myself off the couch and put my feet on the ground and think about life and every day that led up to today, and be like, I need coffee and a sausage biscuit would be good. I kind of turned on the computer. It was already on Facebook, and there it is. Bernie Wrightson has passed away. And I went numb. And I felt silly and all this stuff. Because earlier this week I bought for $2 at a little shop. I got the god awful Wes Craven Swamp Thing. So bad you gotta love it. It had to purposely be a B movie. Had to have been. And it's kind of weird to get that. I changed my avatar on my Facebook to Swamp Thing, giving a thumbs up as a joke and stuff, because I got this the other day, and then here it is 4 or 5 days later. Bernie has passed away. I think he was born in 1948. The guy grew up reading EC comics, horror comics, a fan of Frank Frazetta. He's just one of those guys. It seems like he was always there in comics, for me at least. As a kid, it was one of those things I've talked about before, where when I was dabbling in these books and looking through these heavy metal magazines and seeing these movies when I was a kid and stuff, you always kind of notice things that stood out. And then when you get older, it's really cool, because all of a sudden you find out it was all the same guy doing the work. Mike Plug was like that. Bernie Wrightson was another one like that. Read Swamp Thing was all in my house, and I read those issues. Issue number 2, The Man Who Wanted Forever, was one of the books that actually kind of got in my head and freaked me out, because Bernie Wrightson, without knowing who he was or anything like that, had this one little unman, one little monster that was nothing but a slimy little head with the fingers to walk around on, and the deformed and all that stuff like that. And it stuck out in my head because for some reason the anatomy on that didn't have the words when I was a kid, but I could believe that I could go outside and see that little monster. And I wasn't one of those kids that had a problem distinguishing fantasy and reality and stuff, but his monsters looked like I could go out there and see them. And I sit here and I wonder, as I grew up and stuff, Captain Stern popped up in heavy metal. I was going to get the VHS tape that we bootlegged in my house since the early 80s and stuff, where we watched it. Creep Show with Stephen King and stuff. I loved it. It has the comic book bumpers, I guess, for each little short story in here and stuff. And this was an ode to EC Comics. And the world has really lost a great artist. Forget about comic books for a minute. This man was amazing. And I could sit here and I'm kind of numb right now, but I could sit here and tell you 1 or 2 artists from EC Comics where you can see he directly pulled from. I always saw some Frank Frazetta in his work, in my opinion, but I'm like that with John Buscema and stuff. But I always kind of, and I've met Bernie a couple times at Heroes Con, and of course the first time I met him, maybe it was the build up in my head over years of seeing his work. I lovingly thought he was creepy, and I was like, whoa. Met him again, and he signed some comics, for me. And I'm the kind of guy that, I just don't really grab comics just to have an artist sign them. And I'm really shying away from. I can't. To me, I still think it bothers me when I see that ink on the cover. They should be on the inside. But he signed some books for me that I really enjoyed. And while he was signing them, he started smiling, and that's really creepy to see Bernie Wrightson smile. I mean, his smile was kind of a chuckle. So I come home and I have this stack of Bernie Wrightson comics, and I sit right down after coming back from Heroes Con. I didn't sign that one, but you'll see what I'm saying. And I sat down and I'm like, he signed all these books for me while I'm shooting a video live. You know, I'm shooting the video. And I'm showing these Bernie comics, and like I go through there and I finally figure out what he's laughing about, what he was laughing about. Because as I'm doing the video and I uploaded it the way it was, I go through 1 book, 2 books, 3 books, and I'm like 4 or 5, and I started realizing he only signed 3 books. He was sitting there faking it as a joke. Now normally with these guys at the Heroes Con, at these conventions and stuff, I would normally say they were just being a dick or being passive aggressive or something towards fans or whatever. But with Bernie, I felt like the guy kind of liked me, where I was, you know, kind of like talking comics, being kind of goofy, probably where I'm an older guy too and stuff like that. And he was ribbing me old school, you know. So I was like, there's a saying that if you're traveling around the world, that you're not really accepted till the women of a village laugh at you and are sitting there talking about you and stuff. And the old school way of picking on people is that if they're not picking on you or joking with you, you're not really liked. So it's not that I'm like, ooh, Bernie liked me or anything like that. It's that I saw a side of Bernie that was old school that I understood. And this guy, when you look at his work and the horror that he does and some of the sci-fi and things like that and stuff, you know, this guy's got a twisted sense of humor, and that made him unique, and it was very cool to experience that just for a little bit. And over the years, you know, I don't think I went to his table the last 2 Heroes Cons I went to, but I went quite a few times before that, I think, you know. So it doesn't mean we were friends or connected, and that's what I was going to talk about, man, you know. The thing about Bernie's art that gets me is that the guy did horror and monsters. He did a little bit of sci-fi and stuff, but he had that extra thing. I've always wondered why. Why do we get upset when people we've never known, even though they create stuff like that and stuff like that, we get upset? I can understand being sad that somebody's not putting something else in the world, and you know. But the trick with Bernie is what I figured out as I've had time to think about it this morning, is that you have Swamp Thing, which was a monster. And the lore goes that when Len Wein and Bernie ended up doing that House of Secrets 92, 94, whatever it was, the first appearance of Swamp Thing, you know, it was a one-shot story. But the lore goes is that Bernie had broke up with a girlfriend or something that broke up with him. He was heartbroken. And he was talking about it. Len Wein kind of looked at him while they were sitting in a car, and he was like, you know, I just wrote a story kind of like that. And Bernie's like, I have to write it. So despite having all this horror and having all the monsters in it and things like that, Bernie put some emotion in it. And I think that's what we kind of attached to when we read his stuff. And that may be the real reason I think Bernie kind of became a legend in his own time and stuff. Because you have the Swamp Thing here. But if you go through the book and read Bernie's Swamp Thing, and you look in those 2 little horizontal egg-shaped orbs with just a little black dot and stuff, they're very human emotions coming through these monsters that he has. He just didn't do the scary monsters and stuff. Swamp Thing was terrified like we would have been, and you could see it. He's the monster, but when he runs into these things, these other monsters and stuff, man, there's that human reaction, that emotion and stuff. His body language in this stuff, when you got past the deep blacks that he used and the creepy little moon that he used to give you silhouettes of a forest or some creepy house and stuff like that, the body language told the story of what these characters were feeling stuff. They were hunched over, they were sad, they were underdogs, they were hurt. They were Frankenstein running from the castle with the pitchforks coming after him. And then he could turn it up like he did in Freak Show and Heavy Metal when I was a kid and didn't know it was Bernie. And I'm reading this traveling circus. It's right out of Freaks, the 1930s movie and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is intense. And I'm like 7 or 8 reading that. And I'm just like, cool. And I just kind of like walk away from it. I used to be terrified of Jack Kirby art when I was a kid. And I'm sitting here as I'm talking wondering, was it because of Bernie that shit seemed a little bit tamed down, you know, and stuff, you know. And like I said, as I grew older and I'd watch these movies, all these things that I was into and stuff, as I got older I started hearing Bernie's name and I'm like, oh my god. And then the thing that Bernie brought was his other fans. You would run into some Bernie fans. Tim Anderson, Scott Connor, my buddies and all that stuff. Big, huge Bernie Wrightson fans, so they were still buying the new stuff. And I reached this point of comics where I'm like, Bernie's taking forever to do Frankenstein Alive. I'll grab something when it's done. So the man kept working, and I had friends very dedicated to his work and stuff. And I'm one of that guys that always saw him as this is a staple. Guy did what he loved. So I'm kind of wondering why I get so upset every now and then, or touched, or bothered, or whatever you want to say, when somebody like this dies. When Alex Toth died, I was at work, and I was at the computer, and it came up, and I shared an office at that time with 2 other people, and I didn't really say anything, but they noticed something was wrong with me, because if I remember right, Alex Toth had died. I was like, okay, this is the man that brought all the cartoons I watched and stuff, and I had some of his books and stuff. And I'm sitting there reading, and I think it was his son or somebody in his family said that he had died at his art table, his drawing table, and that got me. About 15 minutes later, I'm just working away and all this stuff. I guess I'm being real quiet, and one of the guys I'm working with is just sort of like, man, you alright? And that lasted 2 or 3 days. Charles Schulz passed away. When he announced he was doing his last cartoon, his strip of Charlie Brown and them, I thought 2 things. I was like, I hope Charlie Brown kicks the football, which he didn't. And then I'm like, he's going to pass away. I think he did the very day, or not the next day. It's things like that. Christopher Reeve, when he died, it bothered me and stuff. Then we have Bernie Wrightson. We live in times right now to where I really appreciate these people that are artists and put out things, and it's sad when they're gone, because you could technically say one life provided by fill in the blank. Think about things you grew up on when you were a kid, and the people that made them, and how it enriched your life. And like when you get into comics and stuff, you end up making friends through comics and talking about these guys and having conversations and remembering stories and going there, and you got something in common. It's in times where it seems like people just want to turn around and criticize and rip apart, and let's look at media, look at our entertainment, and with very warped vision, in these days and times. It's kind of sad when the people who actually created, and you can connect through their work with them, seeing a little piece of them hidden in this job that was their job and stuff. It's kind of sad. I think it's really sad that we lose that in this world, and hopefully nature abhors a vacuum, and I'm not really seeing a lot of people coming in to fill in those vacuums when we lose these people. Oh man. So yeah, pretty heavy. Comic book artist dies, and there's all these things that he does, and all these things we talk about. But you want to know what the real thing I think is with Bernie passing away is, as comic book fans, as people who read this stuff, and we criticize and we praise and we collect, we put in money, and we say, oh, that's cool, and what the hell's he doing, and get your book out, and all this stuff. End of the day, we've lost one of us as collectors. Bernie was a comic book fan. Bernie was a horror fan. Bernie grew up on the EC Comics. Bernie connected with Stephen King because they were both EC comic fans. Everything I've talked about, what comics can bring you, and how you can be a fan of it and love it, what it brings you, and the joy and stuff. Bernie was one of us. Stephen King technically was one of us. They became friends. They collaborated. They ended up creating. Bernie Wrightson ended up doing quite a few things with Stephen King over the years. Kind of brought a credibility to the hobby of, the comic books and stuff over the years. You had Watchmen and Dark Knight, getting critical praise, and you turn around and you have Bernie Wrightson doing sketches and novels and stuff for Stephen King, and working on movies and stuff. EC Comics, Frank Frazetta, Frankenstein, the monsters. What little we know about Bernie is through his work and stuff, and he loved the same things a lot of us do. So that kind of humanizes him. So, had a few words that are about Bernie, and I know there's probably going to be some people who are going to be going through their books and their things that grew up with him a lot longer than I did, that who actually knew who he was and stuff. I was just a kid and stuff. So, yeah, we're all in this together, man. So, yeah. Best wishes to his family. I'm glad after all the health problems and brain cancer and stuff that Bernie had over the years and stuff, glad you're not suffering anymore. And let's face it, man, thank you for all the good books, the good memories, and let people feel things on the roller coaster of emotions, through your work, man. Godspeed.